Welcome everybody to the 1% Frequency Podcast. And today we have the most incredible guest with us. Her name is Kara Lovehart. She's been my client now for, I think it's been 6 months, hasn't it? Which is
Yeah, it feels a lot
crazy,
longer.
right? And I mean, she's just like an absolutely incredible human being. And I'm just so excited to have this conversation with her because I know, first of all, you're going to get to know her and how incredible she is, the work she's doing. But also, we're going to bring some really powerful conversations to you guys that we've been having throughout this work together about the whole spiritual community today, spiritual business industry, patterns we're seeing there. You know, a lot of the things that I like to say sometimes that this spiritual business industry, like the honeymoon period's coming to an end. There's been a lot in it that has not been in integrity, not been based in honesty, love, service, and it's been coming from ego. And we're going to be bringing a conversation to you today in relationship to that. So I'm super, super excited. So Kara is a mind-body psychic medium. She's also an executive intuitive coach and founder of Firefly Hollow Wellness. She helps conscious leaders detox from burnout, align with their intuition, and live their purpose fully. With over a decade of experience in holistic healing, energy work, and trauma-informed coaching, Kara bridges science and spirituality to empower others on their healing path. She's also the host of the Mind Body Detox podcast and a passionate advocate for conscious community building. So, Kara, it is so incredible having you here. Can we start this with first you telling our listeners who and what is a mind-body psychic medium so that they even understand what it is that you do? And then if you can tell us as well about how you ended up doing this. How did you find out you were a psychic, like a psychic medium, a body-mind medium? When did you become aware of these abilities and how did you end up doing the work you're doing now?
Well, when I originally started, I just called myself a psychic medium. And what I found is that then people started coming to me thinking and making an assumption that I only talk to people who crossed over and that we do afterlife communication services only. So then I was like, well, that's not actually correct because of my capacities. So I was like, well, how about I call myself a medical intuitive? Because I did research, I did some training with some medical intuitives, but again, I was like, now we'll do this. And then people would just start coming to me and the questions started coming out a lot of diagnosis questions, even though I put up front, as a medium, we're not a doctor. We're not here to diagnose. It's not within our scope of practice. But they would come to me asking things like, do I have cancer? And so then again, I was like, this is also putting out the wrong label of what I do. And so, for a long time, I would say, well, what do I call myself? Because it's all energy. It's all interpretation of what that is. And it's learning a language. And whether you're working with the physical body, whether you're working with someone's soul, their spirit, past lives, people have crossed over, even interdimensional beings, if you want to call them, star seeds, it's all consciousness. So I think it didn't compute to me, even early on, doing this work, where I would meet different professionals. They're like, I'm an animal communicator. And I was like, okay, cool. I see the animals too. And I talk, it just didn't make sense. And I think for so much of my world, my journey was really in a small town, not really exposed to other people that had multidimensional capacities, and they were more in a different space in what their awakening was. I learned as my progression continued in this profession that not all psychic mediums were healers. Not all psychic mediums were here to heal themselves and heal their body, heal their mind, get their energy into a place of cohesiveness and alignment. And I started to see distortions in the way that they would show up, misuse of power, corruption, and all this stuff. And so I just was like, well, in order to help people understand what I do, holistic medium was the term I called for a while. But then people still were like, but do you talk to people who are dead? No, they still didn't cross. So I was like, look, mind, body, psychic medium. And then there's always the question that comes up and you go, well, what is that? And I'm like, let me tell. And then I can actually say, because I would prefer not to have a label, but in this business, you have to have some sort of pointing at what you do.
So then tell us a little bit about what does that actually look like? What
Sure.
is it when someone comes to you?
Sure. So I'll go back to how it started and my first experiences with this type of work. When I was a kid, I had no idea that I was kind of operating from this different plate of a non-ordinary consciousness on a regular everyday basis. For a while I was tapping into nature, to working with my pets and my animals and talking to them. And I think that because I was definitely an undiagnosed child on the spectrum, and there's a high correlation between people who are very highly spiritually gifted and on the spectrum, it was like so interesting to look back and see that I didn't have the awareness that what I was doing was strange or odd. It was my social circle wasn't really big. And it wasn't until I hit elementary school where you start to care about socializing that I started to look around and say, something's really odd about the way I interact with the world. And then the masking starts to come online. Like, let me just become normal, right? And so I actually, when I was 12, 13, the sensitivity got so incredibly, I guess, paralyzing, overwhelming, that I was unable to understand how to not take home emotions from other people when I was at school. And we had this whole, let's take her to a mental health counselor, let's get diagnoses, let's put her on medication. And someone who's highly sensitive to substances and everything, energy, it did not do well for me. But I was maybe 10 years down the rabbit hole of hospitalizations, medicalization with what's going on, and a core belief that something was wrong with me, and perpetuating that core belief. And so when I was 21, my insurance ran out. So I ran, oh, no more medication. They're done. And it's because I couldn't get them anymore. All of a sudden, I was back to where I was operating, where I was seeing things from a non-ordinary state. And I was working for a chiropractor at the time. And we saw about 200 patients a day, and it was an open office setting where they would come in and I would get them ready from body workers' perspective, massaging them for their session. And I started to see auras again. And I started to then say, this is a perfect environment for them to come in, to me see, feel, hear, sense what's going on. And then they're like, I say, how are you doing today? And they're like, I have a headache or a migraine. I'm like, yes, that's right. And so it was really beautiful to have this setting with a lot of patients a day, a very fast-paced environment, to start building this psychic dictionary of what things are. And not only seeing it visibly, clairvoyantly, but then feeling it in the body. And then I'm going to chiropractic school. That's what I'm doing. I'm going to be a healer. That was the next trajectory. So biology was my undergrad. I went in and I was loving everything about learning the body, because the more information I learned that was data points, the more my subconscious could use that to pull upon when I was getting information for reading for people. I had a 2-year-old at the time, and chiropractic school took a segue or a pivot to go to massage licensing to get that first, because then I could legally put my hands on people before I had to finish the school. And then I was doing massage therapy, and in that practice, of course, it's wait, how do you know how do you know where I'm hurting? How do you know? And then, oh, she's a body whisperer. That was what people would call me. And I'm like, all right, that's kind of a cool thing. But I still hid this aspect of myself because I live in a conservative part of the United States that I could see dead people. And because when I would come out, they would scare the crap out of people. Even a colleague I worked with one day at the chiropractor, she's like, oh my God, I have a headache. I was like, is it right in here? And it's coming from the back of the head and going up around. And she goes, how did you know that? And it freaked her out. And so I had ongoing experiences of when I would share what I do, it would freak people out. So when I went in my own practice and started working with people with body work, with energy work, getting training in that, it started to become clear that when people's energy fields are balanced, top to bottom, left to right, and there's this pattern of organization in the energy field. When it's organized and balanced and in alignment, we see different beliefs people are carrying, or they can go through a change in their belief system, and they can be in alignment with joy, with openness. They're healthy in the way their lifestyle is. It became very clear to me that people's energy fields could shift with their consciousness, because their consciousness is expression of who they are in their energy field. So I was trying to figure out how to manage my sensitivity at the time. And I knew if I could see this change in people based on their diet changes and this and that. And then we went down the holistic rabbit hole of well, let me see what's going on with my gut health. Let me see, oh my God, I had lead poisoning as a kid. This is probably why I see all these things. Oh my God, this is all this stuff that I'm dealing with toxicity wise. And so I shifted my lifestyle. And because of that, I was able to change my energy and be able to open up clarity in my channel. And I was then seeing my former colleagues that were unable to handle their sensitivity. They were getting chronic health issues as mediums. And I see this as a big pattern in people who even are self-declared empaths. They start getting these issues in the body. And so that took me down to, let me coach people, let me work with this system that I created that's mind body detox. How do we help people become aware of their energy first off? So it's not just some mystical thing that they can't experience subjectively because they read a book about chakras, right? Let's just talk about it and experience it somatically and measure for them. Let's measure your energy centers. Let's measure the chakras so you can see it, simply with a pendulum. At the time, that's what we had, right? Now we have other cool tools we can do that with. And that helps them to see where they're at in their expression of their consciousness. And so we would work with food, body work, mindset work, repatterning with beliefs. And it was just, or back then it was like affirmations, right? That's the thing. And so we would do that for 8 weeks and see transformation. And it was so amazing to see because I knew it was my journey. When you are a healer and you walk the talk, you do your own work, it automatically will start to come out in the work you're doing with clients. And I started to see then limitations in other practitioners that weren't doing the work. They weren't taking care of themselves. It's the healer, heal thyself. They don't do that first. And it was like the best thing because I learned so much about what other people were doing that was creating blocks. I could see it so clearly in their energy. I'm like, oh, they definitely have issues with that. I could see that. And then they'd start talking about it. I'm like, oh, well, let me make sure I don't do that. Or how can I learn from that? And so I created this system, and the system has ever evolved as I have evolved. And so when I work with people as a mind-body medium, it really is people coming to me. What is their intention? Because if their intention is we're going to work with someone who's crossed over, then I get maybe a lady with their mother who's like in their 60s, right? Her husband passed away. And when I'm working with that person, that individual, I'm not channeling star beings. I'm not talking about body health. Let's change smoothies so your hip can heal better. They come to me for the intention of, I want to talk to my husband who passed away. So that's kind of like where I go. And I kind of get into that state of consciousness and the language that comes through for that person. It's almost like I feel like God source uses my energy to speak to them in the way that they can understand and the way that gives them the most help on their journey. So there's the psychic medium capacity still there. Then some people, okay, I need to talk to my animal. Or, hey, I do have something going on in my body and the doctors can't figure out what it is. Can you give me insight? And then I say, hey, let's see what's going on. And hey, go to this doctor, see if they'll give you this scan or this blood test, because this is what I'm seeing, feeling, with the caveat of my disclaimer of I'm not a doctor. And this is, making sure up front people know I'm not going to diagnose you with cancer. But that's as far as the reading capacity. And then body work comes in. So I love body work. I love knowing that there's something in the world that is now becoming more mainstream, because I've been doing somatic work for 10 years. The body work I called was soma touch therapy. Like before it was like everywhere you see somatic base, it's everywhere now. And I'm like, great, this is so cool. And I just called it something different for years. And people are really into it because most bodies walking around, humans walking around, are disembodied. They're not in their body. When I see them, it's mostly we're mental in our capacity. And so embodiment for me not only has supported my success in everything I do, but seeing it help heal and balance other individuals that I work with. So that includes physical body work, a lot of myofascial release work. This is connective tissue. Like that is where we hold so much of the emotions, and bridging the gap with working with the meridian system from traditional Chinese medicine. And I do a modality called color puncture, which is using light and frequency through the meridian system. Because when I found that system, just a quick tangent on it, it took everything I already knew to be true about color and frequency and light in people's auras and the meridian system and integrated in just the functional aspect of health and wellness. Like, let's not just bypass and look at the esoteric part of your astrology and your medical astrology, why this might be showing up for you, but let's look at blood panels too. Like, it was one system for the first time that took everything and bridged it together. Because working in this line, until I met more people recently and that modality and you, there wasn't that many people that were able to let's get nerdy about science. And then let's also talk about the great existential crisis we're going through, spiritually, and things that might people look at you and you're batshit crazy. So yeah, that's the long story of what a mind body medium is. I hope that's clear because I'm still working on clarity of how do you explain to people what that is?
I think that's a forever question with spiritual humans in business. And they're like, create your niche, do this, do that. And you're like, dude, hands down, it's why I started a podcast, because I'm like, thank God I can have long form content to actually bring into a form, like explanation of like the depth of this work, and we're showcasing it. Because I'm like, there's no way I can write an Instagram post on that. But I also love
Yeah.
what you brought up, about this like science part, because what I see is, like I look at everything through like patterns, beliefs, common denominators, and we have brought this separation that happened during Renaissance, right? Spirituality was put into the same bucket with religion, and then science was put on the other side, and we're still playing out that belief system. And it's like this crazy thing when people ask me a lot, right? Because I come from a scientific background, I have a PhD in neuroscience, and then people are like, how is it possible that someone who did science ended up doing this? I'm like, dude, it's the same thing. Like, science is the search for truth, spirituality is the search for truth. They're one and the same. We just created this mental thing that like we cannot bring them together. And I think all of us who work in like because I used to work in holistic health, right? Like, one of the biggest things I've been saying forever is the moment when Western science and like holistic, natural Eastern modalities, other, let's call them alternative modalities, can come together, that moment we are gonna literally like quantum leap our collective health. But it's the ego component that's coming in the way. And so I love meeting people and talking to them who are like, I do not, like, I'm putting my ego aside and I'm just bringing in whatever is necessary for humans to actually get results. And I think this is the mindset we need going forward. So, okay, I have more questions about this, but I actually want to ask you a question first that I think will be a really curious one to talk about. And I would love to hear, what is your take on being an empath? Because I know you mentioned like taking on people's emotions, right? And I've seen a lot in the spiritual space. People are like, oh, I'm an empath. I take on other people's feelings. And I'm like, I truly believe it's a trauma response. It completely, and people create it as a label and they're like proud of it. I'm like, dude, you just have no energetic boundaries in your life.
Yeah.
So I would love to hear like your take on it as a very highly sensitive being.
Being an empath is a trauma response. That's why most of my work now, moving into more of the field of education for massage therapists, is trauma-informed and chronic stress training, but not just for working with clients, because they'll come to the table going, I need to work with my clients because they're traumatized. But a lot of times you're actually traumatized, and that's why you're called to this work. And that's why you're so sensitive and you're picking up everything, because when you get in that trauma response, so many things happen to the brain and body, right? But disassociation and this lifting out or being in an altered state as a way to potentially cope, or becoming hypervigilant of picking up all the sensory input from around you. And this is a great evolutionary response to be able to make sure we stay alive. It can also be a response not just from environment, with people or things that were threats or perceived as threats, but also environmental toxins. Like I said, lead poisoning for me, more recently understanding there's a mold issue in my home. Like having these threats to the body that the body doesn't know what to do, so it's putting it on high alert. So, yeah.
Yeah, I love that, because I say this a lot when I work with other humans, right? It's like, we all have weird beliefs, right? We all have weird stuff going on, like energetically, frequentially, that is bringing weird stuff into our lives. And I'm like, that's never a problem. And having things like vices, like resentment and doubt and guilt is never a problem. But it's like, the problem is when we normalize it. And when we claim that something that's actually unhealthy, potentially pathological, is the new normal, right? Which is something we do in our society all the time. Like, we're normalizing obesity. We're normalizing that people have back pain issues in their 20s. Like, we're normalizing all these things that are actually super low expression of consciousness. And then we're settling for that instead of like actually claiming what we desire. And I think it's a similar here in the spiritual community. Like, we take on a lot of this like lower frequency. Of course, it's present everywhere. And then we're normalizing things and even using them to be special, right? Like how some people used to
ADHD. Everybody has
Exactly.
ADHD now.
Everybody's neurodivergent. Everybody has ADHD. Everybody has some mental health issues. I'm like, you really don't need that to be special, though.
Yes.
We do not need that.
Yes.
Yeah, I love that. Okay. So what I want to ask you is, because this podcast will be presumably mostly listened to by entrepreneurs, conscious leaders that I know you work with. And I would love to hear, what are some of the signs or red flags that someone would be noticing in their day-to-day life, in their business, in their life, as a conscious leader, as an entrepreneur, that would be showcasing and be kind of like a pointer saying, there's an imbalance in your frequency field, and that it's something that, for example, you could work with your modalities. So what are some of the things they may notice as symptoms, as thoughts, as patterns, things like that?
All right, so if someone's a solopreneur first, because it's a lot more beautiful of a reflection if you're actually running a company and you have different business partners or colleagues. That's a like even bigger expression because you're not alone and you can see reflection in that. But if you're a solopreneur, first red flag would be, your energy levels. Are you actually able to take care of yourself on a day-to-day basis? Are you feeling overwhelmed to your brain's racing at night before you go to bed and you can't like calm down and sleep? Are you blocking out time for your own self-care? If you're neglecting that and you're starting to see this pattern of having to maybe stretch yourself a little bit thinner to get something done, if you start getting in the rat race or the hustle culture, or if you're buying into the hustle culture, I think that's a really big red flag. But it's also not seen as a red flag. It's seen actually as something that's applauded. Like, ooh, yes, you're doing it. You're busy. You must be successful because you're so busy. And I don't think that that's actually the case. That's a huge sign that you're starting to get out of alignment. If you're not having dreams at night, or if you're having too many dreams and you're not getting into deep stages of sleep, because that's showing a potential issue with the brain. We need to get in these deep stages of sleep for regeneration and also for us to process subconsciously what our mind, our intuition's coming through. And if we're not getting in deep stages of sleep, there's other things going, whether it's stress or toxicity. If you're, of course, having to use stimulants, or if you're finding yourself grabbing like food or whatever substance it is, or it could be the next program or the next podcast or the next book. A lot of times I see solopreneurs and entrepreneurs all across the board that are always trying to buy the next thing, and they don't actually come out with their amazing gifts and talents. For 10 years, they're like, I'm not ready yet. I'm doing the next thing and next thing. And I think that the biggest red flag is if you're not having a space to slow down and reconnect, you're going to be not just physiologically more heightened. Your nervous system won't be downregulated, but that also affects the way that your brain processes information and then the way you're able to connect with your intuition, with creativity. And you're not going to be able to connect with your source. You're not going to be able to connect in with your intuition and align your energy. And you will constantly be in that fight, flight, fawn, freeze, flop, whatever, all the different responses that we call them. And you're not going to actually be, energy alignment is the more important thing across the board. But people want to be mental first. They don't understand energy alignment because they've never maybe experienced it in their body, what it feels like. So I think that's a big red flag. If you don't have a structure, but there's so many people. Did you know the statistics of people that don't have a business plan? It's so interesting when they're starting a business and they don't have a structure for their budget. They don't have a budget, and that's really common. And I think that's okay because we still learn, right? But having a structure and a plan and strategy and goals, but also being open to the universe, like leading you wherever else it needs to get. Got another one. So if someone is feeling triggered, responding to other businesses or business owners in a way that they are feeling threatened, and instead of the space of like Freudenfreude, like, oh my God, look at them. They're so great. I want to do that. That's so cool that they're doing that. And let me collaborate with them. Let me learn from them. Let me go and be in their circle. For years, I started a networking group here in my local area, and I never saw in these networking groups collaboration. I saw competition. I saw fear. But I knew from a perspective of like, it's just fear when you don't have that confidence in yourself, and it's natural not to have that when you're starting out, right? But I was like, I want to give us a platform where we can like connect with each other. And it was really challenging because people still would come in feeling intimidated, and who are these people? And like the social dynamics and things that would come up. And that takes a lot of personal development work. Like, being an entrepreneur is like the fastest track to awakening. And you said also having children. I was like, yes, I say this all the time. And so it's really important to have that awareness that you're going to be going into a space where you're going to be triggered. And if you trust your triggers, they lead you down to where are the blocks? Where are the things that you want to look at that might be beliefs? Where are the things that you could let go of. There's a lot of spaces where I've always had that. And for me, the trigger, I think we're going to talk more about this, but my trigger was seeing so much misuse of power in the spiritual community and me not wanting to be a part of that. I mean, disassociating from it and say, I don't even want to be associated with it anymore, and almost checking out from a 2-5 perspective, being in my 2 where I'm hiding.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
And I see this a lot. I mean, like we talk a lot. For those of you who know human design, right? I'm a 5-1. Kara here is a 2-5. Like, I think half of my clientels are like fifth lines with a lot of Scorpio. Like, I'm Scorpio rising, like Mars, Pluto, first house. It's like that energy is very strong here. But there's a lot of this, like fifth lines have so much power. It's actually insane. Like, it's this authority. But yeah, most of us witness this abuse of power and all of this, and then we pull it back because we don't want to abuse it. We don't want to like be the ones who can hurt other people. And then we're actually hiding. And this is like the most painful thing for a fifth line, because we all know we're meant to be seen on a massive scale, impact a lot of people. We have really powerful gifts, but then it's like, but what if I can't be in integrity? And we're learning virtues, right? It's always we're learning virtues of integrity, of honesty, of truth. And like it is, fifth lines are leaders, right? And this is like part of this podcast. Like in my intro, I have it's new wave leadership, because this is a big conversation we're having in my spaces all the time. It's like, what does that actually look like? Like, what does it look like when we let go of these paradigms of competition, right? Like, what does it look like where we truly just stay in our power? And I think a lot of these things you brought up are so like important and people don't understand, right? It's like what I talk about for me when I see that someone is totally misaligned is when they're either in fix-it mode or avoidance, right? And this is fight or flight, right? Or like freeze, fawn, like it's all nervous system based. And people oftentimes don't understand power is just grounded neutrality, where you can actually stay in your own lane and you're not pulled into a million different directions. And the first thing when someone posts something on Facebook, you're like, oh my God, should I pivot my business? Oh my God, what if my messaging isn't good enough? And this is actually just showcasing like a deeper level of frequency evolution that needs to take place, of alignment, right? Before that person can actually embody their like actual soul's truth, at which point everything becomes redundant. Not redundant, like that's not the right word, but like so much of what we're taught in like the business space is like so this masculine based strategy and messaging and like all of these boxes, and then we're told these narratives of like the market is oversaturated, which this is like my biggest freaking pet peeve. I'm like, how is the market oversaturated for your soul's truth? Like that doesn't even make any sense. But it's because people buy into that because they're actually out of alignment. Right. And it's like once we actually step into this, there is so much truth, so much power, and this ease that comes with it, because you're just like connected to source and you're just doing your soul's work, and that's it. Right. Like life doesn't need to be that hard. That I love how you brought up as well, if people have no dreams. Because I actually had that noticing with my partner when we started seeing each other many years ago. And he was like, I never dream. And I was like, oh, interesting. This is like definitely not normal. And through doing frequency work and all of this, he started actually dreaming. And it was so interesting because first he was dreaming in like black and white. And then he started dreaming in color. It was like fascinating.
Wow. But yeah, no, it's really important. And that's why I think the body work piece and energy work piece, you can do it through just theta healing and meditation too. But they're all tools lead to the same path, right? And I think it's important to make sure that's coming online. The other thing I was thinking about that came up was trust your triggers is like the biggest thing, trusting your triggers and be aware when you compare. That's always, I say that be aware when you compare, because when you do that, you're not in your own lane and then you get distracted. But the other thing that's kind of a red flag, and I don't really know how you help someone determine this, it has to be self-awareness. Self-awareness is if you don't have that being an entrepreneur, you won't go far. That's all I'll say. And so I've met a lot of people that want to be an entrepreneur. They have big dreams about it. They pipe dreams about doing it. And they do the path, but they find out, and it's still learning for them, but they find out at the end that that's not actually what they're supposed to be doing. Like there is this whole thing, I think we've seen even more so since the pandemic, people wanting to get out of a system that has an organization that's led by corrupt leaders or corrupt managers, or managers are misusing their power, or they don't know how to lead. And that's why, if you are an organization that has colleagues, it's a whole different animal then. And red flags are if your staff is not happy, if there is drama in your clinic or your business or whatever, or if there is miscommunication, there's a lot of skill sets you have to learn there too. But I just think that there are people that have come into my business and in my world for years that they get really excited when they meet a healer or a coach and they have an experience, they have a healing experience and they go through transformation and then they want to do it too, which is amazing because we need as many people out there in alignment to do this type of work because we need a lot of help, right? We need a lot of guidance. Walk alongside each other until it's time to walk away, right? That's how it is. You shouldn't ever stay with one person forever. That's my opinion. Like learn and outgrow your coach. That's what makes a good coach. But I think that people get really excited and then they don't actually have the personality to be an entrepreneur. It would be better for them to get excited and be able to do what they want to do as an entrepreneur, as a team member or a colleague or a collaboration or even an employee of another entrepreneur that has the skill sets to be able to see top level thinking and see how everything connects in a business. And like even for my business, it's all about the energy and it's all about the alignment of the staff, because if they're happy, the clients are happy. And if they get along and it's a work family and there's no corruption and we all have an equal place to be able to bring our ideas, like the way I've led has been so strange that people have come from corporate America have come in to work with me. It's freaked them out. And then they felt unsafe. Even though there was structure and rules and boundaries, it was so weird for them that to me, I was like, all right, already that's on alignment. They're going to fall away because then their nervous systems get dysregulated. They start to project. Like all sorts of things happen when people are dysregulated. So if your staff are not happy, they're burned out, they're not taking care of themselves. It's almost like you take your solopreneur red flags for yourself and apply it to a group and in group dynamics. And that is like a whole other animal. But I think that's a thing, like, is having the self-awareness to understand and to admit when you find out that maybe I'm not supposed to be a solopreneur or be an entrepreneur and run a business. Maybe I'm meant to, my power will be better power with others together who have a similar mindset, culture, vision. And that's the part that for years of my business, I'd see people come and then they would join and they'd be like, well, I want to go do my own thing now. I'm like, great, go do it. Like, go do it. And then they come back like, well, it didn't really work out. I'm like, I didn't know you didn't have the capacity in your nervous system. Nothing, no judge. It's just about who you are and what you're here to do. But you have to learn. So I don't know. That's hopefully that doesn't, hey, if it triggers people, there's my 5 line. Go figure it out. And then if you can actually get real with your ego, then you can actually put your power out there in a group and make more of an impact.
Seriously, this conversation alone should be a podcast in itself, because today I was on Threads. I recently got on Threads. I still don't know if I regret it or not. We'll see. But, I saw this, like a post from a person. She was like, I want to start my own business. I don't know what, but I want to start it. Can you give me tips? And I went into comments, and the comments was comment after comment of people, you should do this, you should do that. And I was the first person, I think there were something like 22 comments on that post. And I was the first person, I was like, this is actually insane what is happening in this comment section. I'm like, Scorpio 5-1, I'm like, we're not beating around the bush. I'm like, this is not a hobby. Like running a business is not a walk in the park. Running a business is a real deal. Like, not only is it going to ask you to develop mastery in a lot of spaces, and if you're a solopreneur, like, I'm so glad I'm a manifesting generator. I know you are as well, because you're going to be wearing all the hats. And like, I like that, but it's not for everyone. And you're going to have to develop mastery in so many different ways, right? Especially if you don't have business background, which I didn't as a scientist. And then on top of that, you're going to have to do all of the personal development if you don't want to hustle and work 16 hours a day and burn out and all of that stuff. This is not a joke. This is what I mean, that this honeymoon period is ending. Like, everybody today has their own business. And I'm like, how did we get here? We are devaluing like what it means to run a business. And it's a lot of work. Like for me, I started my business in 2021. I first burned the business down because of all the shit that came up, right? And then I went on to learn all of the things. And it's now realistically like 4 years in that I'm finally at the level where my business can fully be supporting me when it's growing, when things are going up, 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 up. This was a really fucking hard journey. And I tell people this is way harder than doing a PhD in neuroscience was. Like, it's a different kind of hard, right? But it's going to challenge you in so many more ways. And I think this is such an important point you're bringing up, because people today just think like they can go and start their business and they're going to start making 10K months, like 3 months in, which is then shit we also see in the marketing, right? In this industry, which I also have a lot to say about, as we all know, right? And a lot of it isn't true. A lot of it is lies. lies. Like a lot of it is just like distorted. There's a reason why not everybody has been an entrepreneur historically and why it's not today. Like this is not a joke. And we need to start getting clear. And then because of this immature mindset, we're then seeing, right, what you talked about before, we're having people who have no plan, no structure. If I ask them, like, how much money are you making? What are your goals? What are the numbers? It's like horror, you know, on their face.
Yes.
And they're like, money. And I'm like, dude, you have to be okay looking at your bank account and having an Excel spreadsheet. And there are people who are like, I've heard people come up with the craziest excuses. Like, I just don't believe in the financial system as it is and does blah, blah, blah. I'm like, okay, like, I agree. A lot of systems today are crap. Like, I'm the first one to say that, but are you going to change the whole financial system, or are you here to make money doing what you love and actually change people's lives? And if the second one's the case, then you have to be okay with like using the financial system. But it's really, and this especially in this spiritual mindset where there is a lot of this wishful thinking and people are very ungrounded. We see a lot of this, and then people are wondering why they're not making money, why they're not growing, why clients are not coming in. And I'm like, well, but have you looked at your copywriting? Do you have funnels in place? Like, do you have strategy? And then it's like shocked Pikachu, you know?
So we have 80%, 70 to 80%. And this is, of course, not like a data point. This is my estimate of like when I've seen businesses over the past 15 years rise up, because a lot of them want to come work with us or come do some like single class workshops at our place. And they're like, they're little, and it's wonderful because I'm like, oh, you're super cool. Let's see what happens. And 70 to 80% of them don't stay. And it's really interesting because there's so much, there's scarcity mindset. There's not having a plan. There is, if you're called to heal, you've had some sort of wound, which is amazing because then if you work through it, then you can really help people if you work through it. But that's the part that not everyone knows how to yet. Because I think, so years ago, I work at a metaphysical bookstore and we partnered with this beautiful store that's been for 40 years in the area. So like the only place that people were like, I can get my crystals here and all that stuff. And years ago, I was always like, you know, it's so interesting that so many people aren't even aware of this stuff. And I was into this since I was like 16. And I was like 2017, 16, I started to see crystals at Target and like these big box stores, like chakra candles, affirmation cards. I was like, ooh, it's coming. And so I would like hashtag mainstream metaphysics. It's coming. I'm telling you, it's coming. And when it comes, I said, when it comes, it's going to be the trajectory of when people get into the spiritual line of work or their own self-work is they have a little bit of a stint where they have that like honeymoon period, like you said, where everything's like so cool. It's like magical. And it's like, oh, I love that phase. It's so fun. And like you start having these synchronicities happening to you and you're seeing 1111. You're like, wow, like you feel for the first time this experience of like source or creator. There is something that's actually loves you or is connecting to you. You start to interpret it whatever way. And then you go through this like dark night or fall. And usually at that point,
comes in.
Yes, but usually because it hasn't been more in the vernacular since like 5 years ago, people either get scared and go back to the church or they do something, they just kind of disassociate and check out and don't do the work anymore. And I was like, well, this is going to happen with the collective. And I told my partner, and 2020 hit and the bookstore had been never busier. People coming in one after the other. I need a crystal for this. I need a candle for that. And every time he comes in, we go, hey, none of this stuff works. Did you know that you're the one that makes it work? These are all like, you want a money candle? Great, we'll get it to you. It's going to help you if it helps you, but it doesn't. And so like, I love that because like I'd seen so much of distortions about where people create beliefs around these different little subculture based things. Like, you know, ascended masters and all this stuff, which is so cool. All of it's so cool, but it all has this limitation because it's only one step deeper into finding or helping you find your power. Until then you're like, well, that didn't work anymore. And then you kind of go to the next thing. But this is the collective awakening and the honeymoon period is happening. And that's why in 2020, you know, I've been doing my Mind Body Detox program since 2013. And I was like so excited to have the time and space in my business to actually bring the content into an online platform. I was like, ooh, I have time to film videos now. We're in a pandemic shutdown, like, right? And then everyone was out there doing a program and I was like, ooh, I really don't think it's time. it wasn't time, because not only was it felt invasive that everyone's really grasping at, give me your money, I am the coach, come to see me for this, because everyone was going through their awakening because they had the only time and space that we were all forced to collectively to take a look at ourselves or disassociate and drink a bunch of alcohol when other people were going off into their, toxins and they were putting in their body to cope through the process. It was like, all right, it's just not time. And then I saw more and more people were so upset with, like I said, the business structure and who their owners were. I don't want to work for them anymore. I want to leave. I want to quit. I want to do my own solopreneur thing. And I'm just kind of quietly waiting. I've been quietly waiting for the space to come to the other side where it's like, and we can go into this, we'll talk about building conscious community, but like people are ready now to like align with the entrepreneurs, the businesses, the organizations, or starting or growing their organization so it can actually make an impact instead of like seeing how, well, my business has to be better than yours and it's competition. It's like, well, why don't we just collaborate and make it quicker and faster and share resources? How about that idea?
Let's dive into that, because I wanted to have this conversation with you because I know we talked so much about this, and there's been so much conversation. We've touched on it here a few times, but I really want to talk about what's unfolding in the spiritual community with spiritual bypassing all of this. And the angle I would like to take on this and ask you to speak to it is that first, I want you to tell us about, as a highly sensitive person, as someone who's experiencing, feeling, seeing frequency, tell us what is happening in the collective. What is happening on the frequency level. And then let's take it into the conversation of how that is reflected in the spiritual community, because the collective level of consciousness, there is no industry that's exempt from what is happening there. And I want to take this conversation to what we talked about, the abuse of power, conscious leadership, how this is affecting us, and just open the can of worms and let it loose.
Okay, cool. Well, so first I want to give people power to understand how they can read the collective as well, because it's not just my whole thing is everyone is intuitive. Everyone has a connection. And so I'll just share my process for how I read the collective. It's really, everything is symbolic energetically, what I feel in my body. What you see in the news is still fed to you. Like even when you go to the grocery store and where's the magazine aisle and what's at the checkout, what do they want you to look at? But it's so interesting to watch those things because on some level, there are topics that are interesting and up in the collective that people are buying. And of course, they want to make money off of it. So I love, over the last 5 years, watching front covers of magazines at the checkout of the grocery store, ooh, witches and the history of witches, and ooh, mindset and meditation and nervous system regulation and detox diets and things that I know from a functional, holistic perspective. I'm this is really great. Reiki and alternative healing. Oh, I get it. And I'm crystals at Five Below. Some of these things, I'm it's here, right? Here it is. So there's a collective interest in it. And interestingly enough, because people want to capitalize on it, here I got in the mail the other day a Scientology Today. My brother lives in Clearwater, Florida, where their headquarters are. And he's not a Scientologist, but we get this shit in the mail. And I was like, what is this? And it has this questionnaire. It says, how toxic are you? Right? And they're asking questions. There's a collective consciousness shift to wanting to look at what's toxic, right? Just look at the administration of the United States. We need to get rid of these chemicals in our health, make America healthy again. And I'm just well, finally, everyone wants to start looking because it's collectively of interest, right? It's collectively of interest. We're aware enough. But of course, I will kind of take a side note on misuse of power, because this is, Scientology is more of a culture of taking away your power. So we'll say questions like, have you felt fatigued now and then for no reason? Have you experienced drug flashbacks? Do you feel less than alert than you used to? Do you sometimes get a feeling of lightheadedness or being spaced out? These are all questions you would ask someone who's experiencing trauma. Someone who's this is where we need to be aware, because these vulnerable populations who are experiencing the trauma of the world being shifted and changed, we see now there are more than two paths, because I think this sort of black and white thinking where the spiritual community thinks that we're shifting into 5D and people have to make a decision, and it's no, that's not true, but that's truth for them because that's what they believe. Yes. So go with it until you figure out that doesn't give you your power. And so we're going seriously.
I love that.
Yeah. So it's All right, well, then you could see really, if we're going to still view it that way, because the collective still is in, mostly collectively, a black and white polarized left and right and wrong kind of perspective. Like, I don't live in that reality. I live in more of this multidimensional gray reality of everything. But the collective is still in that. And you can see it very clearly in everything with the news. What is it polarized? There's never any gray. When we start seeing gray and more like documentary style, like more curiosity and questions about could this be true, or what about this perspective, or what about this one? When you start to see that showing up in the collective, we're on the right track. Or I can't say right track because there's no right or wrong, but just like the track that I want to be on, that I'm on,
Yes.
and that I would love to see in the collective. But that's how I read the collective. You want to look at what's going on globally and how everything is representative of different things. And like it's even, the whole systems approach of looking at it even astrologically, of different countries have evolution in their astrological charts, what that looks like, how it interacts with other countries. It's a whole like systems think broad. If you want to get really into understanding the collective, study systems biology and systems thinking. And then you can start to see how it all interacts. And you're like, ooh. So yeah, so that's how I read the collective. And right now it's still in this polarized state. So we have individuals who are choosing to find themselves, choosing truth, choosing power. Because the biggest theme that I see, and I think this could be biased because my path in this world is to find power and help other people find their power too through me doing it myself. And that's my bias. There may be other people that are in a completely different timeline, viewpoint, and they're creatives, and they're like, my power here, or my journey here is to help people find their creative expression. So this is still biased through my perspective, but I see so much of the misuse of power and corruption. But I kind of think that is what people collectively are seeing because everyone's pissed.
Yes.
So I try to look at, is it biased for me because this is why I'm here and that's what I'm choosing to see? But I do think that that is collectively what we're looking at. And there are individuals on a individual spiritual level that in the communities, if we want to dive into micro, the spiritual community of people are still having their first introduction to understanding themselves and wanting to have this personal path that's maybe they still belong to a religious organization, but they're doing something that's more direct line to source. And this is what we have Neptune moving into Aries. Like Neptune moves into Aries, I think next month or very soon. Neptune is like our spiritual, like collective consciousness, where we're at spiritually. And Aries is like this me first, I am. It's very me centric. And it also wants to be the best and unskillful. Aries is very competitive. So in the collective, we can see that come up as like this my own direct line to source, which is all about like what I'm all about. I love that. And helping people directly get connected to that. But then you can see the alternate unskillful aspect of that of like self-righteousness in spiritual ways. Like even in the spiritual community, we got to watch out for people who are like, this way is the best, most enlightened,
and
highest vibe,
the
and the only way. This is the highest vibe way. And you can't do it other way or you're not as high vibe as everybody else. There's going to be this total, and I already see that happening. But again, it's all like, go down that path. Is it going to give you your power or not? And then you realize it's just a dead end, right? It's fine. It's fine. It's all leading us back to where we need to be or where we're going to be. But I do think that the other end of the spectrum is, I just had this experience in my own personal spiritual community, is individuals who really believe they're being self-aware. This is really interesting. They really believe they're being self-aware. And they're, getting into mindset and eating up all the books and the podcasts, but they're doing it from a mental state only.
Yes.
They're still being mentalized and they're not embodying it. And part of this is then they are still then going to become, they're still, I don't want to say the word sheep because that's derogatory, but it's like they're not really choosing. They're following somebody else's consciousness and that they want to be empowered. Because some part of their consciousness, it's like the ego carrot is dangling, like collective people are really liking this spiritual awakening culture. This is something that I should probably be doing. Let's follow the carrot because I'm not good enough, but I need to be good enough by following and reading all those tarot books now because everyone's into astrology. And honestly, that's how I got into this work. I was 16. Seriously, I was like, I love my boyfriend. I want to buy this book on his moon sign so I can figure out how to seduce him. Like total misuse of my like manipulating my only power you think you have as a woman in this culture is like your sexuality. And that's why I got into it. The ego carrot took me there and I'm like, ooh, but then it takes you elsewhere. It brings you back, right? It does it, or you're going to fall on your face. The universe will tap you on the shoulder over and over again, say, this isn't the right way, this is the right way, until you get the universal clue by four, whap you across the face, and then you have to face it. Things will just get bad and uncomfortable and more uncomfortable until you get back in alignment, because the universe is trying to always bring you back in alignment. But I do see people in my own spiritual community that think they're awakening. They're really gung-ho about it, but they're still in hustle culture. They're not aware that because of that, there are distortions in maybe the way that their nervous system is operating, so they can't really think clearly. Their executive functioning is not working, but they really feel they're doing it. And it's really interesting. Like, I feel that they're playing, like you say in the CEO frequency all the time, they're playing their role perfectly.
Yes.
Because they're doing exactly what they need to do, because on their journey, they're going to tap other people on the shoulder and get people interested in this line of work or this, personal journey work that is completely different spectrum of where they're at on their awakening path than where I'm at or where you're at. And it's all okay. But I've experienced these people villainizing me and villainizing people who are actually in a space of truth, but we don't fight back. Like, that's where I'm moving out of with working with you. I've moved out to, like, I don't need to fight them back or defend myself, or because it was very triggering for me for a long time, where there's this ego part of myself that's like, but I see more truth. And it's not that you're bad, but this is, how could you attack me? You're the one that's in this space of negativity and competition and fight flight consciousness, and they just can't see it. So it's brought me a lot of compassion and understanding, but they're just doing the best they can, and it will continue. And I think that might segue us into the next question of, like, how much resentment I was holding on to, watching the spiritual community continue to create misuse of power, which are going to do that. If we want to really find out what power is on this planet right now, you're going to have to be getting ready and be okay with that. You're going to have to be okay with that, because that's still going to happen.
Oh, yeah. And I mean, one thing we know is, right, like, when I teach subconscious, right, like, one of the big parts we look at is the undercurrent part, which is the part of the subconscious that's always, like, trying to solve a problem. And when there is a misuse of power, which there's been misuse of power, like, throughout the history, the known history of humanity, let's call it that, is just power games. I read that book, 48 Laws of Power. It changed my life because it helped me, like, Scorpio fucking obsession with understanding power. But it's really helped me understand how we're playing these power games everywhere. And we are going to try to overcorrect in the other direction, which is what's happening. And I love the perspective you brought in here, saying they're playing the role perfectly. Because what I deeply believe and what my work is based in, there's no victims and villains, right? Because ultimate truth, seventh plane, where we're beyond duality, there's oneness. That's that. But we are all playing out these power games and these different dynamics, right, that are then manifesting as this victim villain. And this can be super triggering. The more we look at these really horrendous patterns, right, I feel like there's one thing to look at it in, like, a personal relationship in childhood. And then there's a whole other thing to look at wars, genocides, things that we're witnessing today from this perspective, because it still applies, right? But we're all playing the role perfectly. It's an awakening process. And at the same time, I think it's really important for us to be having this conversation in the spiritual space and hold ourselves to a new standard, right? Because we are claiming we're doing something different. We are people who are genuinely wanting to do something different. Because you know what? I look at governments, and one of my zones of genius is seeing the gap between what people say they want and what they're doing, right? And a lot of the time you look at the governments today, look at all of this, and you're like, you tell me you want peace, and then you're selling weapons to Israel. Like, don't fuck with me, And I'm like, this is just not gonna get us there. But in this community, more than anywhere else, we actually have the awareness. As entrepreneurs, we're having a lot more freedom. We can choose our clients, we can choose our teams, right? We can actually do a lot more than many people can within these more rigid systems, right? I know when I was in academia, getting anything done there in terms of, like, changing power dynamics, good luck, like, it wasn't even worth trying most of the time. But we also have to hold ourselves to a standard of actually recognizing these power games and seeing them within ourselves, right? Where we create these ego mechanisms of, like, I'm better than that, or they should listen to me, they should follow me, blah, 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 which most of us have, like, no guilt, no shame, right? And actually clearing that out so that we can lead from a place of love and integrity and truth, rather than this fear and manipulation and, like, all these distorted ego paths to get what we want. So I would love now to bring this conversation to a really big part of the work we've been doing together. And this is this resentment that you had towards the spiritual community, towards even some of the people you worked with, right? Humanity at large. And I would like you to speak to what was actually going on with these resentments and how this work has helped you shift how you view yourself and your role as, spiritual guide, spiritual teacher, like someone who is helping raise consciousness on this planet.
Yeah. So it's so interesting because there was so much actual like layers of the on top of the resentment was me being so self-aware to know that resentment and anger is not what I want to be. This is not my truth. This is, and having this, doing all the things and the tools that I've had to work with it, I just still felt like, how am I supposed to help the world when I keep getting projected upon by unconscious or less conscious people? Where I'm here to help. I'm always bringing forth the tools or whatever. And I think it was really interesting when I looked at this was a very, as you call it, a very entangled part of my belief system that went back to something's wrong with me. I'm delusional, being put in hospitals, and me knowing that I'm not, me knowing from years of this work, like I'm very accurate and I'm grounded because I've seen so much of the distortions that people get and they are very living in an alternate reality and they think they're doing readings, but they're really in kind of a borderline spiritual psychosis sometimes. And so like there was a lot of observing that and going, how can I see so clearly and other people can't see so clearly? So it was interesting when I see a lot of the ways that things could shift and change and for the success of others. And I would continually get these people unconsciously moving into me being the mom or dad figure or projecting the whole thing with how we feel collectively about the patriarchy or the people in charge. And I'm just like, well, I just happen to be in that position of being in charge as a CEO of an organization. I run a big holistic expo, so it's not just my colleagues or my employees. It's other businesses that if I turn them down or reject them, I'm the villain. And I think I stepped into this position of needing to have such a high level of integrity in this work as I saw it become more mainstream and being like so many years and so many stories. If you listen to my podcast, I go into stories about some of the things that I've seen and for years not wanting to talk about them because then I would be even more villainized. Oh my gosh, you can't talk about that in the spiritual community. It's love and light. And that pissed me off so much because I was like, that's not true. That's not really what this work is about. That's part of the evolution. That's where they're at. So it's just like, felt like I was always waiting for the human consciousness to catch up to be able to understand what I'm saying or something. And maybe that's happening now. I don't know. I don't care anymore. I'm here. I'm still helping the people I need to help. And they're helping me get over the resentments that I carried from them because it's still there. I'm still processing through it, right? It's not a once and done thing. So the long process of starting to see my natural inclination to be really genuinely, authentically wanting to help and money not even ever being at the front of it. Like I just want to help consciousness because I see it's all connected and I want to help you as a practitioner because you could help more people. And if you can help more people, we can all help more people. And we need that, right? And for years of having the rejection projected upon, it started to create this like barrier around my heart. But what it taught me was discernment. It taught me the most amazing gift of discernment. And I think that as that progressed, it did start to get a little bit jumbled with what's discernment versus judgment, And that's where I always use my tool of like, trust your triggers. Is this person triggering me? What is it? Did they remind me that their face looks a little bit like that person? I know that did that to me. I just dive into it and unwind it. But the resentment for me comes from rejection. That's where it spirals because we work on rejection and regret and resentment with the theta healing work. But it really comes back to like, I don't want to be rejected because if I'm not rejected, this is the existential crisis it went on. We followed the rabbit hole. It went on. If I can't help people and help the planet, because this is what my calling is. And if I pass away and I didn't get to help the planet, I've known what happens to souls as a medium that don't get to finish their path, right? They get stuck in the third dimensional plane, embodied, disembodied spirit sometimes, only when they're like in deep stages of like grief or whatever, and they don't really have that connection to their higher source. They disconnect themselves consciously, then they don't know to move on. And it's just like anyone in the physical plane who's depressed and, your friend or your mom trying to get you out of it. And you're just like in this like blinder state, like, no, I was so horrible. I didn't do the best. I was horrible. My existential crisis is like, I'm going to die. I'm going to be stuck on this planet. And then the planet's going to be destroyed by the extinction event or whatever community's going to do. And I'm going to feel like I let everyone down. Like that was my job to save everybody. But we moved past this whole like savior thing because so many healers have that. And I moved into this space of like, well, what if it did? And everyone just died. And I was like, well, it would be an opportunity for me to learn forgiveness and compassion and acceptance for the choice of free will. And I was like, wow, that's a pretty cool thing. Like, that's a pretty cool possibility. I'm okay with that. But I'm also okay with like being here and it continuing. And we do amazing things on this timeline. And humanity wakes up. That would be pretty cool too. That would actually be more exciting. But yeah, the resentment piece was holding me back from actually showing up. And I'm in the early stages now of showing up, like in the world again, because I took, 5 years after COVID of doing all the admin work, making excuses. Oh, I'm going to do the work behind the scenes. I'm going to help everyone else because I just get projected upon every time I go out there and do my work. But then there was a part of me that had resentment that was like, I have a lot of gifts to give. And I know that other people that come to me, I had a coach that came to me that it was very clear in her energy field why she wasn't getting clients to work with her. And then she came to me and said, maybe I'm supposed to coach you. Do you think you need coaching? And it was really like interesting because I was like, actually, no. But the truth was that I wasn't sharing what I was doing. And this person had worked with me and didn't know my capacities. A lot of my team didn't know my capacity. They know I'm a medium. It's on the website, but they only see me at meetings and see me doing paperwork. And they don't actually ever see me in action and see what I'm capable of as far as helping them look at what's going on. And it's because I hid it and I was growing resentment, but I did that to myself. Like,
Yep.
I did it to myself because I was afraid of more rejection. And that is like, wow, that's like the key of like, why was I self-sabotaging? Why am I not showing up? I just really love how much the resentment has not only cleared that, but just I feel so much lighter. This is who I am. I'm not that person with resentment. And I felt a lot of guilt and shame of actually trying to show up in the online space because I said, I'm not going to show up in the online space if I have a resentment or anger in my field. I don't want that time. So I think that that's pretty impressive. And then I'm really happy to see that. I'm just thinking about that now. I'm processing. But we also have other income that comes in from our holistic expo. So that's been about 16 grand over the last 2 months. And that's really great because we love to, again, continue to express and provide offerings for people. And I think that's the thing that I really love is that moving into this space where I feel really confident about what I'm doing. And there's that, you said like that level of integrity. If I feel like I'm not integrity because resentment's there, that's been really holding me back. And it's been holding me back sharing a lot of what I have to offer, which I know is very valuable. And the other piece was looking out in the world and seeing like, I don't think that the world is ready for this because every time I go on Instagram or I see people what they're doing, I was like, wow, they're helping everybody, but they're helping them from a state of consciousness that is way different. And never, ever to put it in a label of more evolved or less evolved, because that's not even a real thing. That's polarized human consciousness. If we say good, bad,
Ego.
it's ego.
Yeah.
It's more so like the alignment and the frequency or the truth or the lessons or the teachings or whatever I have to offer. I was like, I don't really see anybody out here doing that. And then part of me was like, well, that's why I should be doing it. Why aren't you doing it? Oh, I don't wanna. Like, it was just this, like, how many years of that? But when we started to clear it, well, first, the big thing that we cleared first was that I felt it was not safe to set boundaries. Like I knew how to set boundaries energetically, but with some of the people in my life, I was settling because I thought, my experience had been that people were in a specific frequency of consciousness and I just got to work with them because this is what was available in my area. And I want to still help the community with where they're at and let's bring them in here. But they weren't actually up to my standard. But I had to be real with my standard because I have a Capricorn moon in the 8th house. So it's very like, where is the perfectionist, like toxic part of that? Where is like actual discernment and being in integrity? And what's the bandwidth then of standard? So I had that bandwidth of standard down, which is great. And I feel honored and grateful because I get to discern and vet all of our practitioners that come to our expo because of this corruption and power that we've seen. And all of our vendors every year are like, this is the best energy. It's so aligned. Everyone makes more money. And I'm like, this is what I've been wanting to do for years within my clinic because I know as an individual how much I can manifest for years. But I wanted to do it in a group. But you can only do it in a group if the group is in alignment and if they're taking care of themselves. And so I would teach them my Mind Body Detox program and like, take care of yourselves, get your energy in alignment. These are the things, because holy shit, what would be possible if we would all totally be leaning on each other when we need to, to, hey, don't get into the collective unconscious or the collective consciousness fears. Let's get back into alignment. What more can we create as a group? And that's what we're doing right now. And it's really fucking cool. It's so cool. So one of the things that happened was I had needed to set boundaries. And one of these individuals in my work that was like really doing the whole, I'm doing the work, I'm into mindset, I'm doing all this stuff, but she was very not self-aware at all. And then, looking at her astrology chart later on, we do this at our clinic. We use astrology with everyone's permission to look at how we interact in our connections and dynamics. So it really helps us be more conscious in our organization. And we looked at, we're like, wow, she's got a lot of stuff in the 12th house. She's not aware. She's not going to be aware. Part of her path right now until her progressions go, at least until she gets into theta healing or something where she can override her human design and her astrology, because that is not ultimate law when working with this modality. Like, she's just not there. And she was doing some really destructive things. And I was like, you know what? I need to get rid of this. This is energetically draining everything. And I did. And I kept thinking about everyone in the clinic being healthy, wealthy, and happy. Just really aligning them and asking in my mind, do they want that alignment? Do they want that? And there were two people that didn't want it, like in my mind. Like I was trying to kind of envision them. And every time I was doing that, nope, they're not doing it. They won't. That their free will, they don't want that. They want a different path. They want a different lesson. They want to learn through struggle. So they have left. And after they left, I needed to get more new massage therapists. I was like, well, I got to put out an ad or something to find them. And we got an application for 2 people within 16 hours of me doing that. And I was like, great, let me bring them in. We'll interview them. Me and my office manager were like, they're amazing. Their energy is so in alignment. We ask questions like, do you know what spiritual bypassing and shadow work is? Like, we have specific questions that we ask in our interview to make sure that they really have enough personal development to vibe and align with where we're at as a culture, or else they're not going to work. We have this thing, we call it the Firefly Hollow threshold, where that people for years would come in, and when they come in, they're in this like vortex, you can call it, like, of people who are really aware. And when people come in that are not as self-aware, they would come into this space. It was really interesting. And it would bring up all their shit. Like, it would vibrate all their shadow work stuff to the top that they haven't dealt with. And me and our team would like be aware of this, but then we'd be like, how do we work with that? We don't know what else to do because other people aren't maybe in alignment yet to be here. Well, I think just setting that boundary and just saying, I don't have to settle. That's a huge thing. If you're an organization or an entrepreneur and you feel like it's not in alignment, don't just trust your gut. If there's something more out there, like, you don't have to prostitute yourself to this person just because I want to make money or I need to do this. You don't have to do that. So within, 16 hours, we got these 2 new applicants. They came in. We were like, they're absolutely dream. We went out to lunch. We said, wow, we just need 4. We need 4 total new massage therapists. We need 2 more. We're sitting at lunch. Our receptionist gives us a call. She goes, someone just walked in the clinic, wants to work here. Wow, that's funny. And we laughed. We said, oh, we're in the vortex. We're in the energy. Because I was so out of that space of victim. I was feeling victimized by, I can't, no matter what I can't do, I can't get out from behind the desk doing this admin work because of the people that I work with and whatever the excuses I had that I was blaming everyone else and playing victim games. And then I was like, well, if I could be doing my thing, I'd be making so much more money and helping so many more people. And I know, like, that was part of my ego story of like, bullshit, but I felt that it was important to, really start to get real with it. And then, interestingly enough, after 15 minutes that we got that phone call, someone just walked in and wanted to apply, randomly walked in. We got another call 15 minutes later. She goes, what the heck? We just got someone else that called us on the phone that wants to apply to work here. Now, like, for the whole entire part of my journey as an entrepreneur, I know when I'm in alignment, these things happen all the time. I never had to advertise for myself, for my program, filling my book with a wait list for a year. I never had to do that before I went in admin mode. But so much of the rejection created the resentment that built up in me, like wanting to hide, that I just pulled back in. And then I created this whole reality where everything was happening to me. And I always say, like, life happens through you, not to you. And it was happening to me. I was choosing that because I wanted to, whatever I wanted to do with avoiding the rejections. And again, so I really think on the other side, not only did we bring these 3 new people in, actually we're bringing 4. We have another one that we're bringing in next week. But when we brought them in, As a massage therapist, logically, when you're filling a book of a massage therapist, it takes a little while because you get people in their book and then they have to, do they like that person? What's their rebooking rate? It really depends if they vibe with that personality, the client. And it takes like maybe 6 months to 9 months to fill someone's book. So I just thought to myself, well, we started everyone out at, 3 days a week or 1 day a week for, 3 months just to see if they work with us. That's how we make sure there's like this threshold. Are they going to vibe with us after 3 months? If it doesn't work out, go on our separate ways. I told these 3 new people, hey, we'll start you 1 day a week. We got to make sure it works out and all that. After 2 weeks, they had told their other organization they were working for that they were leaving and they really loved this place. It's so in alignment. And then they got toxic over there. They were really upset and their boss started treating them really horribly, really horribly. And so I was like, let's just bring them in. Let's just bring them in 4 days a week. All 3 of them, 4 days a week with 5 time slots to see clients. And I was like, all right, universe, let's do this. It's not my responsibility because my old method would be I have to go back into admin mode and do all this hard work and hustle to make sure that I get them filled so that I could get back to doing the work that I'm supposed to be doing. And then, then usually it would be the resentment would grow again because I'd be like, I have to freaking help take care of them now, right? Their book, I sent you the screenshot of my reception. She goes, I don't know what you're doing, but we just had 24 new clients in a weekend and their books are filled. Every weekend their books are filled. They maybe have a couple slots on Thursday and Friday, but I also did this thing with my collective group. I said, we got a really good group vibing now in our little group WhatsApp. I said the whole month was prosperity month for March. I was like, everybody spending 4 minutes a day, 2 minutes focusing on your book be filled, your ideal clients, what you want, what you're grateful for, and then 2 minutes a day focusing on Firefly's success or another team member that wants you to say. And it has been tremendously a dream. Everyone's like, oh my God, this is so amazing. Like the energy, like everyone's like, I love coming here. It's so like everyone always loved coming, but that's other than that toxic person we had to get rid of. But it's just been really, really cool to see that and me feel like this is always what I wanted to create. And for the most part, it was there. Like 70% of my clinic was like really in alignment and we were really team oriented and collaborating. But there was always like 30% of the people that were kind of like lone wolf that kind of came in to maybe take advantage of our visibility and get clients and then leave as an independent contractor and do that kind of thing. And I allowed that because it just was like, well, whatever. And I think that all this stuff with the theta healing, it's so much of a deeper way of how I did things individually on my own. Like I would write questions to myself and ask, why am I doing this? What's going on? Where did it come from? And then when I learned this, it was so much more clear with the muscle testing and the way you do it so that we can like get clearer on what it is. And I think that helped because we can still get in our own way. And I just really love how much the resentment has not only cleared that, but just I feel so much lighter. This is who I am. I'm not that person with resentment. And I felt a lot of guilt and shame of actually trying to show up in the online space because I said, I'm not going to show up in the online space if I have a resentment or anger in my field. I don't want that because then I'm going to attract a different type of client that I'm not in fight. I don't want to be in fight consciousness. That's what I see in the world.
It's just out of alignment. It's just out of alignment, right? And I see this all the time with conscious entrepreneurs. Like we talked about it in the CEO frequency as well, right? It's like I have seen so many conscious spiritual entrepreneurs sabotage their success because they place integrity so much higher than an average person. And it's something we don't talk enough about, right? Because it's like, it's all fun and games talking about, money blocks and like childhood and yada, yada, yada. But this is the real thing that's happening in this space, which is beautiful, right? Because one of the things we see in Theta Healing is we're always learning virtues, right? And you were saying some of the big ones were compassion, forgiveness, acceptance, right? And these can be virtues really difficult to accept because it means letting go of control. Right? Which is ultimately, that's our trauma coping mechanism. This is kind of like really surrender, right? Is another one. But one thing that I think is so important that you brought up, is people find it sometimes strange when they come and they do work with me because ultimately I teach manifestation, right? It's like, how do we create what we want? But we start with resentment. We start with rejection. We start with regret. And people are like, well, where's the fun part? I'm like, you do not understand that without doing this work, you may create occasional manifestations here and there, but there's never going to be sustainable growth. And you are going to hit a block. The more integrity you have, the more you're going to hit a wall, getting where you want to go. And what you're going to build is going to be on wobbly foundations. And I think this is actually a really good gateway because I think one of the last things I want to talk about before we wrap it up is I want you to tell us a little bit more about the journey getting there? Because we heard now all of these incredible results, right? At the end of the day, like bringing in like tens of new clients, like, do you have numbers for revenue, what you brought in your clinic in the last month or so, roughly?
Yeah. Let's see.
So we give our listeners an idea of what we're talking about.
Let's see here. In the last, 349 new clients in the last month and $90,000. Now
not bad.
I have a multiple six-figure business. No, six-figure business. I'm sorry, my brain. I was actually just like, I hadn't looked yet how many clients we brought in last month. I was like, wow, that's a lot. But I think like, again, this didn't happen overnight. It was really just me. If you're a solopreneur, like it's going to take a little bit more like online coaching, higher ticket clients and things like that. But this is a staff, you have 16 staff. So, and they're not all working full time. So I think that's pretty impressive. And then I'm really happy to see that. I'm just thinking about that now. I'm processing. But we also have other income that comes in from our Holistic Expo. So that's been about 16 grand over the last 2 months. And that's really great because we love to, again, continue to express and provide offerings for people. And I think that's the thing that I really love is that moving into this space where I feel really confident about what I'm doing. And there's that, you said like that level of integrity. If I feel like I'm not integrity because resentment's there, that's been really holding me back. And it's been holding me back sharing a lot of what I have to offer, which I know is very valuable. I know so many entrepreneurs out there that struggle. Like they struggle. And I'm like, oh my gosh, we need you to be successful. We need you to be successful so we can help the world. And like, let's do that. There's so many signs that we talked about that can come up that you would need help. And why do it? So you don't have to why work with someone like me or someone like you? You need to not have to take the long way. It's too much time. I took so much time for years saying, I can't afford that. And I'll give one example of scarcity and then we'll move into your question though. Like so many entrepreneurs, especially in the spiritual community, there's so much scarcity mindedness that they don't think about what an investment helps them do. I didn't start really taking off in my journey as an entrepreneur until I started actually investing in things that were in alignment with coaching and programs that helped me tremendously. Like for one example, okay, this is a really strange example, but maybe it's not strange. For our Holistic Expo, it's only $350 for a booth for a weekend to see roughly 2,500 people come through the door, okay? We had a acupuncturist years ago that said, I can't do that. I don't want to do that. That's too much money. Now, I think about how much an acupuncture session roughly is $100.
Yes.
If you see and get at least 3 or 4 new clients or 5 clients, and then even just make connections, you're already paying the return on your investment. But so many people, I get that all the time still with spiritual entrepreneurs where they're like, well, it's too much. I said, go to some of these other big expos that are charging you $600 for an 8x10 smaller booth, and they don't do as much work for you. Like and they might not be at integrity because they don't vet their readers. They just let anybody come in. And then you just have weird sales, icky energy of people coming trying to sell you their healing crystal for $6,000 to heal your curse on your family and some shit. Like there's weird shit that happens out there. That's a real life example of one of my clients where I was like, what? Like that is the crap that I see. And I'm like, okay, but like, that's what I'm saying. Like there's not an awareness of how much. And I think that's where we really need to get into why is full spectrum body awareness important in consciousness development? It's because when you're more aware of these different areas of the body, full body awareness, you're more aware of the physical third dimensional plane, as well as staying connected to the spiritual realm. And that's where you can then manifest money and manifest resources and be aware. And even if it takes you some time to get the structures. And that's why most of the people who are healers, they live in more of a non-ordinary state of reality, right? Because we're sensitive to these altered states of consciousness where we get information. We're in Reiki spaces, or we're readers, or we're even like any type of business where you're working with tapping into energy. You're more living in that reality. And because of that, you need to even more bolster a physical reality to keep. It's like people say, I'm a starseed. I'm like, okay, well, can't you plant your seeds?
Yeah.
Plant them.
100%.
Plant them, because just like an electrical outlet has to have a grounding prong to ground that energy into the earth and actually create that frequency to shift the frequency of this third dimensional plane. Like if you want to talk about it really into like out there terminology, you can't do that if you're kind of up and out of your body. And I see how people's energy is just floating above their heads. Yeah. You can't do that. And you're going to have all sorts of body issues and other things the universe is trying to get you into the body until you continue to ignore it through whatever substances you're using, or caffeine or sugar or coffee, whatever it is. You're going to keep playing out the same journey. So yeah, that's my divergent tangent there. But
It's so important because as a human, you're the master of the third plane. And yes, we can have the ascended master, we have the frequency, we can channel higher dimensional information, but like this is the plane you're here to operate on. No offense, but like if you weren't meant to have a physical body, you would have stayed on the fifth plane consciousness and just played around there. Like, and you're gonna have plenty of time there, but like let's learn how to master 3D, which includes money and resources. We gotta be grounded. And anyone who's like, spirituality and money can't go hand in hand, I'm like, you're actually just bypassing a part of creating your reality that you really like shouldn't, because it's a massive portal into understanding yourself and your relationship with the universe. But, you know, that's its own conversation. So we've seen, what I wanted to bring the conversation to was that we've seen all these crazy results, and not just the money, right? It's how you got there in a super aligned way with new team members, everything like vibing. But I also want to bring in that we've been working together for 6 months. And it took a little while.
You want to work on the
get
dark
point.
parts? You want to talk about the dark parts?
I want to talk about your experience of the journey, because I see so many people, you know, it's like what were showcases and like social media testimonials, all of this part is like the fun part, you know, like 18 new clients in 2 days, this amount of money. But, and sometimes it can be after a single session. Like I recently had a client, we did one session, she made 12K that week from literally 0 to 2K clients, right? Like that shit happens. And we're talking about changing frequency at a really deep and powerful level when we're doing this work, right? Because that's the work we're doing here. And because frequency creates reality, reality will shift. Tell us a bit about like how was this process and journey and some of the things you saw that were not, as I call it, butterflies and rainbows, so that people understand what it may look like when you start rapidly aligning and things that are unaligned must go.
Yeah. Well, I really love, like for years working with the Mind Body Detox program, there's a phenomenon that happens when you start making changes, especially when you are really, really on the precipice of great change, that you'll start to either self-sabotage, or you'll start to pull back, or you'll start to question what you're doing, or you start to project on the person you're working with or whatever. And luckily I've been doing this with my own containers for years, that when I was working with you, I was like, okay, when I started to get into this space, when we're working with the modalities, we would do the one-on-one session. And I was working with the online platform where you had the different options to go through some of the meditations on my own. And I think that I felt a big shift when I realized how much the people I started to surround myself with in my social life were really stuck in a space of grief, hustle, torture, and more the emotion of grief, because that is a huge emotion that I had held on to. I think it's the grief of rejection. I was having to figure out what's the grief doing for me. It's just keeping me stuck. And when I realized this, it was kind of like a awareness of like, I really need to move away from this people in my life. And that's something that really brought me into this space of like anger and frustration, because there was a part of the spiritual community that says, if someone's not high vibe, you need to get them out of your life, right? There's toxicity to that. Okay. So I had to be very discerning with like, is this actually what I need to do? Or, you know, because I need to get away from the bad energy of this person and they're bringing my life down. Or is this actually what I need to do? And that was not just a choice, but it actually happened naturally. And that's how it does happen. When you shift your energy to people will fall away. And so I've been used to that for so many years. Like so many years of like, I change and shift and all of a sudden people fall away. And so I think it just became a really normal thing. So that's just something that happened again. And I think when we were looking at, I think it was lead, because I've had lead poisoning, and we had this like huge like upheaval in my life where like, all of a sudden things with my partner and things with my reality were like turned upside down. And I was like, well, I'm used to all this. I went through a Pluto moon conjunction. This is nothing. I was just like so much Plutonian energy in my life, like transformation and transformation and transformation. So I was like, I'm used to this, but so many people who might go through this work are not used to that. And at the same time, you cannot change your reality if you're stuck and rigid in the identity of who you think you are. When you're shifting your consciousness and shifting your energy, shifting your field, so you're going to actually have more manifestations, things come in, you have to shift your consciousness. And when you do that through the belief work with the Theta healing, you shift your consciousness. But you can't do that if you're stuck into the identity of who you think you were or are. And that can bring up relationships ending or new things coming along. And that happened, and it was really a huge wake-up call for where I'd been given away my power in my relationships still. Even though my partner is really amazing, it was just like, oh my God, this is so unconscious. And then I had to have a surgery, which was already planned, but it was really interesting how it lined up it was a pelvic surgery. So it was so much, I know I'm like, all of this stuff that I have is sacral stuff. Money, relationships, resentment towards relationships, all of its relationships. My left hip is hurting. I know from my program and as a mind body medium, like where people store things in the body are associated with so much of their psyche and what's going on in their consciousness. And I knew that for years, but I didn't know how to get myself out of it because I just wanted to hold on to the resentment because it kept me safe from rejection. There was a purpose and there was a why and there was a reason why I was doing it. So it was helping me, according to my distorted perception of how it was helping me. So I had to have like a surgery. I got my left ovary removed. Like I had all this endometriosis that was like totally in my body, which is so weird because it's not in my family. And then turns out later we have like this mold situation in my house and mycotoxins, and that's associated with like higher estrogen levels and higher counts of endometriosis. And when I went to clear the mold on my own later, which is really interesting, from a theta healing perspective, I was like, well, first of all, we're going to actually get the mold out of the house physically, out of this one office space. Because right now, the office you see in the background is like my old room I had to move my office into because it's renovated right now. There's no poor lighting in here. It sucks. But I'm going to be in here while that's getting renovated. And I thought I need to figure out from a theta healing perspective, what does mold represent? Because I want to get it out of my life. And so I went into the work and I was working on clearing and asking what it's teaching me. And I said, I'm going to clear this from my lineage, my line, down my line, my son, and then up my line. And then my mom, I think it was within a day or 6 hours or something, it was within 24 hours, she calls me and says, I need to get a hysterectomy. I have endometrial carcinoma. And I was like, what?
Wow.
And it was like, that's really interesting because the universe had just lined up with me to have a podcast episode with this gentleman who we talked about mold and mycotoxins. And then I was like, wait a minute, there's a connection between endometriosis and endometrial cancers. And my mom lived in this home when there was like the mold in the one area, like for years, like this house has been in my family for 6 generations. So I was like, interesting that I cleared it and now she's getting it removed from her body. And I told my accountant that the other day.
You can't make that shit up.
He said, it was funny. I was like, there's only certain people that I could tell this, that they actually believe it. And, but it doesn't really matter because it's my reality. And it's like, too many of these things have happened for years, but the reality of this work, anytime you're doing any type of identity shifting work that changes your consciousness, changes your reality, you have to learn to surrender and let go. And that's something that people have asked me for years. How do you do that? Because we want to control so much. We want to control letting go. We want to control when we let go or when we surrender. And like it's sort of like an oxymoron. You can't control surrender. So no. Surrender, letting go, self-awareness, asking for grace, asking for help, and taking care of your body, making sure you're taking time and not avoiding. Because as I noticed with one of the weeks for the CEO frequency, I noticed myself getting into more like, I'm too busy this week to do this, not doing that. And I knew that that's just this round, I'm not ready for it. And that's what I found in my own containers, that sometimes people skip a module or they just don't do it because either they don't need to do it or they're not ready for it. And I know some of the people in the CEO frequency were like, well, I may be behind. And that perfectionist, like I need to be on time and make sure I'm doing it all right, comes up. And I was like, I've seen this before. It's okay, guys. It's gonna be fine. I will address it when it's time. But there's only so much you can do because you're doing this in an expedited way, in this program, and you have the materials forever. And I think that's important for people to remember, because if you feel like it's getting too overwhelming, that's on you. Like you can choose to slow it down or you can choose to surrender and let it happen fast. It depends on like, do you want a rude awakening or you want a gentle awakening? And sometimes you just need that like non-gentle awakening through the process.
Sometimes it's the only thing you allow yourself to experience, right?
Yes.
I deeply believe it never has to be, but it's our belief systems that dictate these things as well. And it's so interesting because it's like this concept, like this surrender piece comes so big, right? When we try to control so many things and we get into like programs and masterminds and we're doing these things and it's like, I'm behind and all this. I'm like, or we can trust that everything's coming up when it needs to. I also always tell people, you can keep clearing your beliefs until like for the next 60 lifetimes, right? Because we can do all the childhood work, we can do all the ancestral work, and then you have the collective subconscious realm. And I always tell people, it's the best. It's a fucking Netflix show for me. You know what I mean? If I want like an entertainment episode, I'm gonna go work with collective subconscious and see what's been going on. But there's no way you can clear it, everything, because it holds like your soul, because it's oneness ultimately, right? Holds the imprint of everything that's ever happened to anyone in any dimension, any lifetime. Like it's all there, right? And this is where ultimately this piece of surrender comes in, when you're like, it's all perfect. Like there's no destination, right? It's all unfolding in its perfect time. Let me trust that I'm in a perfect space right now, because objectively speaking, I cannot not be in a perfect space. And let's just come from this place of ease and surrender and knowing that everything is unfolding as it has to. And let me take advantage of things that are available to me. And like, wow, what a fucking privilege to be doing this, right? And I think we're all getting to just be, it's like, I feel like the processes unfolding are happening on like so many different levels, right? Because like one thing is the work we're doing either one-on-one or the CEO frequency. And then there's like the meta version, right, of all the processes and ideas that are coming on around doing the work itself and how the work needs to be done and how like all of this, it's revealing so much about our relationship to the self, to the universe, to all of these things. But it's as you said before, like I think it's a beautiful like point to kind of end things on, is like it's all bringing us closer to who we are, always and forever. There's no right, there's no wrong. It's just choices. It's choices, it's energy, it's frequency, and the corresponding reality that manifests. And that's just the journey of being a human, and there's no end game, right? There's no destination.
Absolutely.
Beautiful. Okay, we are going to bring it to a close here. This has been absolutely, absolutely incredible. I have one last question to you before you share with us your offerings, where people can find you. And this is, if someone is listening to this episode and they're on the verge, they're thinking, maybe I want to do this one-on-one work with theta healing that Alja's doing, or I want to try the CEO frequency, I'm really feeling the pull. What would you say to them?
I would say that if you are someone that is really invested in doing your own work and taking full responsibility for your reality, and you're ready to be aware of where you might project onto Alja, you might think that she's gonna, whatever, you're saying she's not gonna save me, but she's gonna lead the way, and you're really ready to just trying to be stuck in areas that you may not even actually have like any clue of where it's connected. You might think it's this thing, but it's actually something completely different than what you thought. I think that would be the best advice I would say. And a one-on-one session is very tailored to what you need, but you might want to get into the container and then find out that this is helping you a lot.
Yeah. Beautiful. So let's finish this off by first, can you tell our listeners about your current offerings, and then where they can find you and connect with you either in person or virtually if they listen to this and this was like, I want to learn more about her, I'm interested in working with her. Tell us about where they can find you, and of course all the links will also be in the show notes.
Okay, so first off, if you are a licensed massage therapist and you're living in the Pennsylvania area, you can of course come and see us, and I'd love to teach, and we have all sorts of different kinds of continued education courses for licensure. Second off, if you are in the Northeast region and you're a entrepreneur that wants to be in a holistic expo that is fully aligned and not having any sort of strange riffraff or things going on, which is totally blowing up not only our visibility for our event, but also the integrity of it. And we just got grant funding for it to like really make it much bigger. So if you're someone that's interested in being a part of that, you can go to newvisionsholisticexpo.com and check that out, because that's another opportunity to jump in and be a part of an amazing community. If you're someone that wants to be on a podcast, and check out, my podcast if you're an entrepreneur. I'm looking for applicants who are in alignment to discuss cool things. And also it might be helpful for you to just learn a little bit more about what I do in depth. And if you want to work with me one-on-one, I have one-on-one entrepreneur executive coaching that I work with people. I do a free consultation just to see if we're a good fit, because I'm not here to work with people who are not in alignment. I'd rather refer people out to what might be in what they're looking for, specifically people who are working in collective groups. If you have clients and you have staff that you're working with and you're organizing that, really trying to figure out how to get everyone on the same page and align everyone's energy so you can make the most income and impact for the collective right now, that's also there. And then you can check me out on social media, Kara Lovehart, Lovehart. And I have some, link tree there that has some good free offerings, some tests and all the fun things to sign up and see what else I have to offer and work with me in that way.
Thank you so much, Kara. It's been such an honor having you here. Thank you for taking your time for this incredible conversation. I have no doubt we'll have you back for some more spicy conversations around this. And yeah, it's been such an honor and a privilege to sharing a part of this path with you.
Awesome. Thank you so much.